My name is Cassidy Morgan Brooks, 31 years old, and I still can't believe my own parents did this to me. 30 days. That's exactly how long it took me to turn their dusty, forgotten tea shop in Burlington, Vermont into the most beautiful little bakery cafe this town had ever seen. $48,000 of my own money, blood, sweat, and zero sleep, and on day 31 we opened the doors to lines around the block. 1 week later, my mom looked me in the eye over Sunday dinner and said, "Cassidy, we're giving the shop to Landon. You have 45 days to get out." Just like that. The place I built from nothing, the business that was finally turning a profit, handed to my spoiled 27-year-old brother because his latest music producer dream crashed and burned in LA. They offered me $5,000 to walk away. What I did next left every single one of them completely speechless. If you're watching this, drop where you're from in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe right now because you need to see exactly how this family betrayal ended. Trust me, you won't believe the fallout. Just over a month ago, my world ended with one email. I was sitting at my desk in Boston when the calendar invite popped up: all hands, urgent. 45 minutes later, I walked out with a cardboard box, 2 weeks of severance, and no health insurance. The rent on my Back Bay studio was due in 9 days, and the $48,000 I had scraped together over 8 years had already disappeared the previous winter, paying for Mom's second round of cancer treatments. I was 31, unemployed, broke, and staring at the very real possibility of sleeping in my car. That night, I called home. Dad Glenn Brooks picked up first. Before I finished the sentence, Mom Teresa Brooks was on the other line. They didn't ask questions, didn't lecture. Mom simply said, "Come home tomorrow. We have something that might work." I threw everything I owned into my Honda that same evening and drove north through the night. Dad met me on Church Street the next morning, coffee in one hand and a heavy key ring in the other. We stopped in front of a narrow storefront that hadn't seen daylight since I was in high school. The faded lettering above the door still read, "Harper and Daughters Tea Room." The windows were filmed with 8 years of grime, the awning sagged, and someone had spray painted over the old hours sign. Dad had to shoulder the door twice before the swollen wood gave way. The smell hit like a wall mold, dust, and something sour that had been trapped since the Clinton administration. Half the drop ceiling tiles hung loose. The carpet was black with mildew, and the original oak counter had a crack running straight through it like a lightning bolt. When Dad flipped the breaker, exactly 2 fluorescent tubes buzzed to life and then died again. "Property taxes are killing us," he said, kicking at a loose baseboard. "We can't sell Grandma's place, but we can't keep bleeding money either. If you want to fix it up and run something here, it's yours. No rent. Ever." Mom laid out the only condition. 30 days, Cassidy. Get it open in 30 days. After that, you can stay 3 years, 5 years, however long you need, as long as the place is making money and covering the taxes. Nothing on paper, just their word against mine. I shook on it right there in the dark. I stood in the middle of that disaster and felt something click. 30 days was impossible, but impossible beat, sitting in Boston watching my life disappear. By the time Dad locked the door again, I had already named it Cassidy's Corner, a bakery cafe built around scratch pastries and small batch loose leaf teas this town had never seen. I opened a new business checking account that afternoon, transferred every dollar I had left, 48,000 total, and started calling every contractor, plumber, and electrician who owed me a favor or would work for cash. Demolition started the next morning, and I never went back to my parents' house to sleep. I bought an air mattress, set it up in the storage room, and lived on site for the next 30 days straight. Those 30 days turned into the hardest, fastest month of my life. Those 30 days turned into the hardest, fastest month of my life. I hired 3 separate crews and paid them premium rates to run round-the-clock shifts. One team ripped out everything the moment the sun came up. Another started framing and electrical before the debris was even in the dumpster, and the third crew showed up at midnight to keep the noise complaints down. Money left my account in chunks of $5,000 and $10,000 at a time, 48,000 total by the end of it, every penny I had in the world. Days 1 through 5 were pure destruction. They tore down the sagging drop ceiling, yanked out the moldy carpet, jackhammered the cracked concrete, and hauled it all away in rented roll-offs that never stayed empty for long. By the end of the first week, the place was nothing but bare studs, exposed brick, and a cloud of dust that coated my throat no matter how many masks I wore. The new hardwood floors went in starting day 6. I chose wide plank white oak because it warmed the space instantly, and the installers worked in 2 teams, so the glue never had time to cool. While the floor cured the plumbers and electricians ran new lines for the commercial kitchen, I had already ordered sight unseen from a restaurant supply auction in New Hampshire. The marble counter arrived on day 14, a single 12-foot slab of Carrara that took 6 guys to carry through the front door. They set it on custom steel brackets I had welded in a shop 2 towns over. 2 days later, the neon sign guy hung the custom pink script that read, "Cassidy's Corner," in the window, and the glow lit up Church Street for the first time in years. The kitchen equipment showed up in waves. The double-stack convection ovens and 6-burner range came on day 18, the reach-in refrigerators and freezers on day 21. I paid the delivery drivers extra to help muscle everything into place because the installers were already behind schedule on the exhaust hood. The hood itself, a $15,000 stainless monster, finally dropped in on day 24 after the roofers cut the hole and sealed it the same afternoon. I lived on Red Bull, and whatever Kendall Brooks, my best friend since middle school, dropped off when she finished her shift at the hospital. She would walk in at 2 in the morning with takeout and watch me paint trim while the tile guys grouted the backsplash under work lights. Some nights, the only break I took was sitting on an overturned bucket eating cold fries and staring at the progress, afraid to blink in case it all disappeared. The vintage tables and bentwood chairs I found on Marketplace arrived on day 26, restored walnut tops and all. The upholsterer finished the bench seating along the wall on day 28, soft sage velvet that made the whole room feel like a hug. Final electrical trim-out happened on day 29, while the health inspector did the pre-opening walkthrough and signed off on everything with a grin and a promise to bring his wife on opening day. I painted the last section of accent wall myself at 4 in the morning on day 30, hands shaking so badly the brush left streaks I had to go over twice. When the sun came up, I wiped everything down one final time, stocked the pastry case with test batches I had baked at a rented commissary kitchen for the previous 2 weeks, and brewed the first pot of tea in the new machine. At exactly 9 o'clock on day 31, I flipped the sign to open. People were already waiting outside 20-30, then 50 deep. By noon, the line wrapped around the block. We sold out of croissants in 40 minutes, scones in an hour, and every slice of cake before 3. The credit card machine never stopped chirping, and the tip jar overflowed twice. Mom and Dad showed up at 10 with a pair of oversized scissors and a red ribbon they had bought that morning. They cut it together while customers cheered, then spent the rest of the day telling everyone in line how proud they were of their daughter who had brought Grandma's old place back to life. Dad kept repeating the same line to strangers. 30 days, start to finish, can you believe it? Mom posted pictures on Facebook that got hundreds of shares before dinner. By the end of that first week, we were already in the black. The books looked better than I had dared to project, and for the first time since the layoff, I could breathe without feeling a weight on my chest. Everything felt perfect. Then, exactly 7 days after we opened, my brother walked through the door. Landon Brooks showed up with Skylar on his arm, both of them sunburned and carrying mismatched luggage like they had just stepped off a Greyhound themselves. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him, hair longer and bleached at the tips, wearing the same leather jacket he left for California in 2 years earlier. Skylar had a new nose ring and the tired eyes of someone who had spent too many nights on strangers' couches. They ordered nothing, just stood by the pastry case scanning the room like they were casing a bank. Landon finally spotted me behind the espresso machine and flashed that lazy grin he always used when he wanted something. "Nice setup, Cass," he called across the crowded cafe. "Real cute." I wiped my hands and came around the counter. Customers parted without thinking. Everyone in Burlington knows the Brooks family drama whether they want to or not. When I reached them, Landon pulled me into a one-armed hug that smelled like airplane and cheap cologne. "We're staying with Mom and Dad for a bit," he said into my hair. LA didn't exactly work out. That night at the house, he laid it all out over takeout pizza in the living room. The music producer thing had collapsed 6 months and the investor money dried up. The apartment got sold out from under them. Credit cards, maxed car, repossessed. Classic Landon. Mom kept refilling his soda like he was still 16. Dad just nodded along, already rewriting history to make the failure sound temporary. By the third day, he was at the cafe every afternoon, sprawled in the corner booth with his laptop and AirPods telling my baristas how much wasted space there was in the back. He measured the storage room with a tape measure he found in Dad's garage and started sketching floor plans on napkins, vocal booth here, gym mirrors there, protein shake bar where my walk-in cooler sat. I laughed the first time he showed me. "You're joking, right?" He wasn't. That whole week, Mom and Dad's texts went from daily pride emojis to radio silence. When they did message, it was short, weirdly formal. "Dinner Sunday, family only. Wear something nice." Sunday came. I closed the cafe early and drove to the house with a bottle of Prosecco because we had just hit our first $10,000 week. I walked in smiling, ready to celebrate. The table was set for 5. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the good plates. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad cleared his throat 3 times before he spoke. "Cassidy, sit down." I sat. Landon leaned back in his chair like he already owned the room. Skylar picked at her nails. Mom finally looked up, voice shaking just enough to make my stomach drop. "We've made a decision about the shop," Dad said. "Landon and Skylar are going to take it over. They need the space for his studio and a small training business. You've done an amazing job, honey, truly. But he's family, and he needs this more right now." I waited for the punchline. It never came. Mom slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $5,000. "This should help you find a new location or get started somewhere else," she said like she was reading from a script. "You have 45 days to move everything out." The room went quiet except for the clock on the wall. Landon finally spoke. "It's not personal, Cass. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I looked at Dad. 45 days after everything I put into that place, he wouldn't hold my gaze. "It's still our building," he said. "We're grateful for what you did, but Landon needs a fresh start." Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. $5,000 for $48,000 of my money and 30 days of my life. $5,000 to walk away from the first thing that had ever truly felt like mine. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loud across the floor. "You're seriously doing this," I said. "Not a question." Dad sighed. "It's already decided." I left the Prosecco on the table unopened and walked out without another word. The drive home that night lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. I sat in the parking lot of my own cafe until the lights automatically shut off, staring at the neon sign I had paid $1,500 to have custom made. When I finally started the car, I didn't go to Kendall's spare room where I had been crashing. I drove straight to the 24-hour diner on Pine Street, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. By sunrise, I had an appointment with Justin Coleman, a commercial real estate attorney, whose name kept coming up in every Vermont landlord-tenant forum I could find. I walked into his office at 9 sharp carrying a binder thicker than a phone book, every receipt, every bank transfer, every photo time-stamped from the 30-day build, every invoice with my name on it. Justin listened without interrupting while I laid it all out. When I finished, he leaned back, tapped the binder, and asked only one question. "Did you sign anything in writing, giving up ownership of the fixtures?" I shook my head. Only the verbal agreement that I could use the space rent-free if I got it open in 30 days. He smiled for the first time. Then, everything you installed is a trade fixture under Vermont law. You have the absolute legal right to remove every single item you paid for as long as you return the premises to its original shell and don't damage the structure itself. The ovens, the refrigerators, the marble counter, the neon sign, the hardwood floor, even the exhaust hood. All of it walks out with you. I felt the air leave my lungs in one long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a 3-phase plan so tight there was no room for error. Phase 1 was documentation. I already had 90% of it, but Justin wanted sworn affidavits from every contractor who had been paid directly by me, plus professional photographs of every installed item with serial numbers visible. He gave me a list of 3 commercial photographers who could do it within 48 hours. Phase 2 was removal. I had exactly 18 days before I wanted the place empty because I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of watching me drag it out until day 45. Justin handed me contacts for 2 moving companies that specialized in restaurant equipment and a secured storage unit big enough to hold everything. Insurance writers were already emailed to me before I left his office. Phase 3 was the demand letter. He drafted it while I sat there, a formal notice itemizing every removable fixture, its original cost depreciation schedule, and current replacement value, plus lost business income for the 45-day shutdown they had forced. The total came to $82,000 even. If they paid within 10 days of receipt, we would call it settled and walk away. If not, we would file in Superior Court and let a judge decide. I paid his retainer on the spot with the last working credit card I had left. Walking out of that office, I felt something shift again, only this time it wasn't hope. It was cold, hard clarity. They wanted to play family roulette with my life's work. Fine. I would play by rules they clearly didn't understand. I called Kendall from the sidewalk and told her only that I needed her truck for the next 3 weeks. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Keys are in the visor. Do what you have to do." By the time I pulled up to the cafe that afternoon, the first photographer was already waiting outside with his gear. Phase 1 began immediately. 18 days later, the moving truck started rolling in at dawn. I had scheduled everything like a military operation. The restaurant equipment movers arrived first, 6 guys in matching gray uniforms who had stripped out commercial kitchens from Portland to Providence. They wrapped the double-stack convection ovens in moving blankets, rolled them out on appliance dollies, and loaded them onto the lift gate before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. The reach-in refrigerators and freezers followed the same afternoon, unplugged, defrosted overnight, and gone by lunch. The marble counter took an entire day by itself. They built a custom wooden cradle, slid hydraulic jacks underneath, and lifted the 12-foot slab in one piece. I stood on the sidewalk and watched it slide into the padded truck like a coffin, then signed the inventory sheet without a word. The neon sign came down next. The electrician killed the breaker, unscrewed the mounting brackets, and lowered the glowing pink script into a crate lined with foam. When the truck pulled away, the building looked naked for the first time since opening day. The hardwood floor was the messiest job. A different crew showed up with floor pullers and pry bars working section by section, so the subfloor stayed intact. They stacked the white oak planks on pallets like giant Jenga pieces, wrapped them in plastic, and forklifted everything into the second truck. Underneath was nothing but cold concrete and the faint ghosts of where the nails had been. The exhaust hood required a crane. They brought a boom truck, cut a temporary hole in the roof, exactly where the roofers had sealed it 30 days earlier, and hoisted the $15,000 stainless beast straight up and out. The roofers followed an hour later to patch the opening with the same materials they had used the first time. By day 12, the custom tables, bentwood chairs, and sage velvet benches were gone. By day 15, the espresso machine, tea brewers, and pastry cases sat in climate-controlled storage 20 miles away. On day 17, the last crew removed the commercial HVAC unit from the roof, the one that had kept the cafe perfectly cool even during the breakfast rush. I worked alongside them every single day, handing tools, signing manifests, sweeping up sawdust so nothing got damaged. I slept 4 hours a night on Kendall's couch and lived on gas station coffee and protein bars. Mom showed up on day 5. She stood in the doorway and her coat eyes wide, watching the marble counter disappear. "Cassidy, please," she said, voice cracking. "This is insane. You're destroying everything you built." I handed her the stack of invoices with my name at the top. "No, Mom. I'm reclaiming everything I paid for." Dad and Landon arrived together on day 9. Dad's face was red veins standing out on his neck. Landon filmed on his phone like he was gathering evidence. Dad started yelling about calling the police trespassing vandalism. I stayed calm, pulled the printed Vermont statute from my back pocket, and read the relevant section aloud while the crew kept working behind me. The officer who responded 10 minutes later took one look at the paperwork, asked a few questions, and left with a shrug. Landon tried next. He blocked the doorway with his arms out, shouting that I was stealing from the family. One of the movers, a guy built like a refrigerator, simply picked him up by the belt and set him on the sidewalk. Landon stayed there pacing and cursing until the last truck pulled away. On the 18th day, I walked through one final time. The building was exactly as I had found it 5 weeks earlier: bare concrete floor, exposed brick, rusted pipes, a single broken fluorescent tube flickering overhead. I turned off the lights, locked the door with the same key Dad had given me, and dropped the keys through the mail slot. 2 days later, the certified letter went out. Justin had already hired Barbara Day, a commercial appraiser with 30 years in Chittenden County, to walk through the empty shell the same week I finished stripping it. Her report landed on my desk 4 days after that: $48,000 in removable fixtures, plus documented improvements that had raised the building's fair market value by $118,000. The demand letter attached both documents and gave my parents 10 business days to wire $82,000 or face a lawsuit for breach of oral contract, unjust enrichment, and conversion. The return receipt card came back signed by Mom on day 3. Radio silence followed. On day 11, Justin filed in Vermont Superior Court. On day 14, the sheriff served papers at the house. That same afternoon, Dad called for the first time since the removal. His voice shook with anger and something that almost sounded like fear. He offered $15,000 to make it go away. I let him finish, then told him the offer was noted and declined. He hung up. 3 weeks later, they tried to refinance the family home to raise the money. The bank took one look at their debt-to-income ratio after years of carrying an empty commercial property and said, no. A second lender offered terms so brutal they would have lost the house within a year anyway. They missed the court deadline. We moved for summary judgment. The judge granted it in under 30 minutes. $82,000 plus court costs and 9% statutory interest. Garnishment orders went out the same week. The bank that held the mortgage on their primary residence saw the judgment hit the public record and called the note. My parents had 30 days to cure or face foreclosure. They couldn't. The house sold at auction 6 months later for barely enough to cover the existing mortgage and the judgment lion. Uncle Curtis, who had offered to buy the tea shop building years earlier and been turned down flat, snapped it up at the sheriff's sale for pennies on the dollar. He turned it into a craft beer bar that still does great business. Landon and Skylar lasted 3 months in a studio apartment before moving to a studio motel off Shelburne Road. Last I heard, he was driving for a delivery app, and she was waiting tables. I took the settlement money, added a small business loan, and opened Cassidy's Corner 2 on Pine Street, twice the size, full kitchen, rooftop patio, the works. We broke every sales record in Burlington the first year and haven't slowed down since. Kendall manages the front of house, and we finally hired enough staff that I sleep more than 4 hours a night. Mom tried once. A handwritten letter, 8 pages, tears smudged on the ink, begging me to come to Christmas. I read it once and threw it away. Dad sent a text 6 months later asking if we could talk. I blocked the number. Landon made a public Facebook post about family who choose money over blood. I blocked him too. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays, nothing gets through anymore. They made their choice the night they slid that $5,000 check across the table. I simply made mine permanent. Some lessons are expensive. If you hand someone a gift and then try to take it back the moment someone else wants it, don't be surprised when they walk away with everything they brought to the table and never look back. Blood might be thicker than water, but it isn't thicker than self-respect. That's the end of my story. Thank you for staying with me until the very last word. If anything in this hit close to home, or if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to choose you, first let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Your stories matter too.